a cipher that has directions to one of the largest silver and gold deposits in the world, unexplained plagues that have ran through society in the past, and a scientific discovery that breaks the laws of physics. All of this on today's most amazing top 10 list. And guys, before we get into the video, make sure you check out our new channel, Top 10 Central Vibe, which is starring me. Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the Beale Ciphers. This is an old American tale that seems too good to be true, but it still has people trying to hunt down this mysterious treasure to get rich. The Beale Ciphers were made in the 1920s in Virginia. Now, they were a secret that was passed to an innkeeper, or so the legend goes. They were apparently written by a man named Thomas J. Beale. That's obviously where the name comes from. Now, when Thomas gave these ciphers to the innkeeper, it wasn't some challenge to see if the innkeeper had the skills to unearth the riches. No, he said he was gonna come back to get the papers from the dude, but then he disappeared, and that was the last time anyone saw him. So the innkeeper sat on these papers for 23 years before he had to crack them open to see what was inside. Turns out it was a bunch of codes that the innkeeper couldn't crack. Before he died, he passed those codes off to another man who was able to crack one of the 3 codes. This code broke down what was actually in the treasure, which was apparently $43 million worth of gold and silver, and that's $43 million in today's currency. Now, apparently the other 2 codes tell you who the treasure belongs to and where the treasure actually is. So one of those codes is absolutely useless. I'll tell you, if I crack that code, that treasure belongs to me. Also, there's a good chance that either Beale went back to get the treasure himself and didn't tell the innkeeper because the ciphers would have been useless if he moved the treasure, or there could have been someone else who cracked the code and has already been there to take the treasure and didn't tell anyone. Like, if I cracked that code, the last thing I would do would be blab about it. I would be real quiet about it. I would take my treasure and then would flip it into cash and no one would be the wiser. Coming in at number 9, we have WT1190F. That sounds like a code you put in to have unlimited ammo in one of the Doom games, but this is a much more interesting find. WT1190F was some space debris that had people all over the world confused about what was going on. People at NASA, as well as several other space agencies around the world, could not figure out what the hell that was or where it came from. And when we're talking about the massive void known as space, it would seem that it really could have come from anywhere. The debris eventually entered the atmosphere and burned up upon entry, so whatever it is, it's gone now. The suspicion is that it could have been something released from a spacecraft, but then the question becomes, which one? And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming in at number 8, we have the Bay of Jars. We know that Europeans did not come to Brazil until the 1500s, and it's thought that those were the first people to cross the ocean to touch this new continent. That was until 200 Roman jars were found on a beach in Brazil. Treasure hunter Robert Marks was exploring Guanabara Bay in Brazil to see if he could come up with any goods. Well, he would find more than some gold coins or a treasure map. He would unearth 200 Roman jars that might change the Brazilian history. This was back in 1982, and soon after the discovery, the bay was closed to stop thieves from coming through and stealing these priceless artifacts. Since then, no one has been able to find out how these jars got there. As far as we know, the Romans never crossed the ocean to make contact with the Americas, but maybe one ship was brave enough to make the journey and ended up docked in Brazil with a ton of goods and no one to trade with. There's also the possibility that these were brought over by colonizing Europeans who wanted to sneak away to the New World with a treasure that could change their life. There are suspicions that the Brazilian government isn't interested in finding out why these jars are there because it would shift the narrative of Brazilian history, and they are happy with things the way that they are. Coming in at number 7, we have Jack the Ripper. We have talked about Jack the Ripper many times on this channel before. This was the man responsible for terrorizing the streets of London back in 1888. He had the whole city on edge because people thought at any moment they could be descended upon by a man in a black coat who would slice them up like a Thanksgiving turkey. This all started when there was a series of women who all turned up dead in the streets. They all died in similar ways. There were slash marks through their throat from ear to ear, and all of them had been dissected with some of their organs removed. Now, the term serial killer wasn't even coined yet, so the idea that someone was going around and simply dismembering people for some sort of sick amusement was shocking to the public. And because these victims were all prostitutes, it made Scotland Yard think that that these could have been crimes of passion. Then the police force would receive a letter entitled "From Hell." This would be the first contact from the brutal killer who would call himself Jack the Ripper. The gruesome letter talked about his killings and also was taunting the police. Even at this point, the men at Scotland Yard were hard pressed to try and find a way to connect this back to a single person. For all they knew, this letter was sent from the newspaper so they could drum up a little business. But then they got one more letter that had a human kidney with it. I think Jack wanted them to know that he wasn't messing around. To this day, we still have no idea who he is. Coming at number 6, we have the disappearance of Angela Hammond, one of the many missing person cases that has never been solved. Angela Hammond was talking on a payphone with her boyfriend back in 1990. She screamed at the top of her lungs right after she described a green pickup truck that had pulled up next to her. Her boyfriend sped off to where she said she was and saw the pickup truck. He slammed his car into reverse, but then he blew the transmission and the truck got away. No one ever found out who took Angela Hammond. Coming in at number 5, we have the sleeping sickness pandemic. As many of you know, COVID-19 isn't the first time that we've had a pandemic sweep across the world. There have been plenty before the one we are currently dealing with, but one you might not have heard of was encephalitis lethargica, which passed through most of Europe back in 1916. It was a strange illness that doctors never found out how to treat or how people were contracting it. It had a fatality rate of 33%, and even if you were one of the lucky ones who could make it through this mysterious sleeping spell, you might never be the same again, as it's thought it would cause long-lasting brain damage. Basically, it would start with someone getting very tired, like they have mono. This would progressively get worse until they felt like they could no longer work and needed to stay in bed. Eventually, they would fall asleep and drift into a coma. Some people would never wake up from said coma. The last case of this was in the 1930s, but we still have no idea what the sickness was or where it came from or how to treat it. I'm sure if it came around today, we would have the tech to solve this problem, but this is still very much a creepy one. Coming in at number 4, we have the dancing plague. Might as well stack one pandemic on top of another one, get them all out of the way so we can have smooth sailing from here on out. The dancing plague was back in 1518, and it started with just one lady who was busting it down and some more people jumped in until there were over 400 people dancing around. This sounds like what's going to happen in the streets as soon as all the coronavirus bans are lifted. Well, the rumor is the dancing lasted for weeks and some people danced to death. Now, there isn't any hard evidence to prove that people died from dancing, but people definitely did dance for weeks. Some of the suggested reasons why: psychedelic mushrooms. Spores were released into the airs, everyone started tripping, and they had to bust a move. Coming in at number 3, we have Cleopatra's tomb. One of the most famous rulers in history was buried with the one she loved, Mark Anthony. Not the singer, you guys can get all those jokes out of your system now. But is J-Lo the reincarnation of Cleopatra? Probably. Back to history. Cleopatra was apparently buried somewhere near the temple of Isis, as people loved her as much as they respected the Egyptian god. Now, outside of her tomb being a great archaeological find, because we know how much old dudes love finding dead bodies wrapped in toilet paper, there's something much more valuable than a queen that has been dead for over 2,000 years. Apparently, the tomb is filled with gold and jewels. Now, there is a chance that this tomb has already been raided and there won't be anything worthwhile in it, but if it's still intact, cracking this thing open would make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. But if you're pulling this one off, everyone around you might want a piece of the pie unless you have the skills to dig up the tomb on your own. So you might have to pull off a Scooby-Doo thing where you pretend to be a fake monster so you can scare everyone off and get the riches to yourself. Coming in at number 2, we have what's going on in the ocean. This is one of the biggest mysteries on the planet. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about what's going on below in the ocean. I mean, we have explored a good amount of it, but there's still so much we don't know, and we are kind of destroying that environment, so if we don't start looking into it soon, we might lose it forever and never get those answers. And if there are evil mermaids down there, they might be gearing up to go to war with us for all the things we've been doing to the ocean. And coming at the number 1 spot is quantum entanglement. Now, I want to start off this point by saying that I am too stupid to know what this is. I think I have an idea of what it is, and that's why I'm putting it on this list, but if I get this very wrong, please feel free to correct me in the comments. Now, quantum entanglement is how a particle can be affected by another particle that is nowhere near it. Now, why is this strange? Because what we understand as physics physics is that two particles that aren't close to each other shouldn't be able to affect one another, and if they could, they would have some means of communication that is faster than the speed of light, which is also thought to be impossible. Now, scientists have witnessed this happen, but they have no explanation as to why it's happening. So this breaks the laws of physics, and we don't know why. Alright guys, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I've been your host, Jade Arena, and I'll catch you on the next one.